Welcome everyone to session 5 of this free online global enlightenment retreat. I'm going to give a very brief summary of the previous 4 sessions, just in case there's any first-time viewers here, but I'll keep it very brief for everybody else. So, enlightenment is possible for everyone. That's the first premise. That's what we focused on in the first session, is to make the concept of enlightenment, the truth of enlightenment, the reality of enlightenment, possible for the viewer, to get that feeling, that confidence that it is possible for you. Because if you don't feel that it is possible for you, then you wouldn't be nearly as motivated and confident in what you're practicing. In the second session, I explained 4 meditation techniques. Initially 3, but the questioner raised a great, brought up a great topic, which I've been teaching in the past. So ultimately became 4 methods. One is your sort of go-to stop and go type of meditation. It's where you relax all your thoughts. You give away the allegiance that you have, the investment that you've invested in all the thoughts that are present for you at that moment. You just give them away instantaneously, radically. You just stop thinking to the best of your ability right there and then for 2 to 5 seconds. And in that hiatus, in that interruption of the subtle body, as you now know, there is a space of nothingness, if you will. There's a presence that remains, a presence that doesn't have the usual content, it doesn't have the usual thoughts and emotions. And in that presence or space or nothingness, you want to recognize the fact that you exist, the I am, the fact that you're aware. Therefore, jumping to, as some of you guys who have watched the last session know, the great causal body, or at least tapping into that ray of God, which we could call the witness, or that individuated feeling of I exist or I am, which ultimately is no different than the sun itself. But it feels like it's over here for most people initially. And that's because of the conditioning of all the senses and the conditioning of all the thoughts and the emotions and concepts we have about space and time and all that. So you interrupt the mind for a few seconds, and in that space of nothing, you recognize the awareness that sort of shines through, the background of consciousness, that feeling of I exist. And you do just that, just 2 to 5 seconds. And of course, if you can kind of rest in it and continue to recognize it, that's wonderful. But if you can't, no problem. You just move on with your day. And the next moment you remember this exercise, you again, boom, commit yourself to radically stopping all thoughts to the best of your ability, or at least completely giving away all thoughts, no attachment to thoughts. And in that nothingness or space or openness or blankness, you recognize that there is this presence of I am, this presence of clarity, of consciousness, of cognizance. And just for a moment you rest in that. That's your go-to meditation method for your everyday life, when you're commuting, when you're talking to people, etc. Now, if you're doing a more traditional sit-down meditation, you've got some time to yourself, a few minutes or maybe even a few hours, then the other technique would be to focus on the I am directly. Basically the same as what I just said, except you just kind of continue to recognize it. You continue to prioritize it. You rest more and more in the feeling of the I am, that sense, that knowledge, I exist. And you ignore as much of anything else that comes your way as you can. You ignore especially the subtle body, meaning especially the mind. You ignore the thoughts and the emotions and the feelings and the desires. And you just kind of, you allow them to be there. You don't have to suppress anything. But it's like they just slide off of you and you remain, again, aware. You bring your attention back to the very fact that you exist. It's very subtle, but everyone can do this because everyone exists to hear my words. If you didn't hear my words, or if you didn't exist, you couldn't hear my words. So you can always recognize that you exist. So again, this kind of skips the causal body, as we've talked about in the last session. So it's great for familiarization. For some people, it's awesome. They can quite immediately anchor into that. But for most people, there's got to be sort of a middle ground of stabilization, which is where the causal body comes in handy. Then the third meditation technique was to give everything away by seeing that it's not the I am, by seeing that it's not what you are. So a thought might come up, and you begin to realize, hey, if I'm seeing the thought, I cannot be the thought. The thought is appearing to me, the thought is enduring to me, and the thought disappears from my view. So my view, or my consciousness, or my beingness, is prior, is before, is more first, comes first, and second comes the appearance of the thought. So how can I be the thought if I'm here to watch the thought come, stay, and go? So and you do that with everything that comes up for as long as you want to meditate. So any registered experience, any experience that registers on your radar, any experience that you're conscious of, you investigate it, you look at it, and you go, neti neti, or not this, I'm not this, I'm not this. And then when you throw out everything that you're not, then what begins to shine forth more and more as you throw off those layers of the bodies, some of the components within the bodies, and finally the bodies themselves, and you see through the fact that you're not in any of these bodies, then what remains is that great causal body. And yes, you can go beyond that too. And then the fourth technique, which was kind of sparked, or I was reminded of by a questioner, and they asked something along the lines of, can I also call everything as me instead of seeing everything as not me? Can I also see everything as me? And it is a very effective method as well, especially to realize the inseparability of experiences and our beingness. So typically I don't recommend that until we already have some understanding of how appearances are not separate from consciousness. Once we have a clear, first of all, intellectual understanding and an intuitive sense of the fact that somehow everything that appears to be out there is somehow not separate from awareness. Perception is not separate from the beingness that's observing it. Once we know that or comprehend it or can look for it consciously, now it becomes more effective to call everything by the same name. So call everything God, for example, or call everything I am. The table is I am, my feet are I am, my sensations are I am, my thoughts are I am, the other selves are I am. Give everything back to, and you can use whatever name you want that resonates the most with you at this stage. God, source, I am, pure consciousness, love, whatever name you want to come up with for God. And you give everything back to God. You basically see everything as that. You can also use the word me. That is me. That is me. This person is me. That thought is me. Boom, boom, boom. But it's good to either make nothing you or make everything you. But if you get stuck somewhere in between and you identify with only a portion of everything that appears, that's when you're in trouble. That's when the identification comes in. That's when the partiality comes in, when the bias and the aggression and all that, the duality. So those are the four methods. Then in the third session, I went on to talk about how meaning is optional and how everything, how this entire existence, this entire universe is naturally, inherently, intrinsically free of meaning, importance, significance. Not importance in the sense of value. The existence, the appearance has a particular value or purposefulness, but none of the components within it have inherent meaning of their own. They're symbolizations of God. They are symbolizations of consciousness. They are symbolizations, permission slips. They are symbols. They are manifestations. They are mirror reflections that allow the Creator to know itself. They are symbolizations of the true self. Nothing really has any substance. At least that's the enlightened view. There's many people that would argue that. But from the vantage point of enlightenment and these types of teachings, we say and believe and experience that things do not exist apart from being or perception. And so these are symbolizations. You could call them manifestations, but they're not really manifest. Manifest makes it feel real and like it has actual mass, but it doesn't really have actual mass. Now, in the illusion, it might have actual mass, but the illusion itself has no mass and has no location. Just like a rainbow doesn't have a location. That's an illusion. A rainbow cannot be found anywhere. It doesn't have a location. But it appears, and you could say that red comes below orange, orange comes below yellow. So within the picture of the hallucination, there's location, and there's order, and there's this, and there's that, and there's law, and there's meaning, and there's da-da-da. But the rainbow as a whole, and therefore including all the components, in truth, in essence, have no location, has no location. It has no location. Even space, even the experience of space has no location. Anyway, I'm getting off course here. So meaning is optional. That was what we talked about in the third session. How everything that we think has meaning is given, provided by us, and how meaning is distracting. And why I'm a promoter of seeing through those self-given meanings, and how that can help us so much on the path of meditation and self-realization by not distracting us nearly as much, and by giving us a much greater sense of natural joy and intelligence. That was another main point I kept making, is we believe that we need to give something meaning in order to be able to deal with it sensibly, responsibly, compassionately, intelligently, but nothing is further from the truth. The more we give something meaning, the more biased we become around that object, and the less clearly and balanced of a view we actually have. So anyway, check it out. It's a fun session. And then later on in that same session, session 3, I begin to elaborate on this diagram. If you can pull up the diagram without the bodies. And it's just a sort of a way to categorize the stages of experience as one retraces one's sense of I am consciousness back deeper and deeper to its source, which is what the art of self-realization is. So the square represents the physical world, or the physical body, or the physical perceptions. The waves next to that, to the left of that, represent the mind, or the subtle body. The third stage in this diagram represents the witness, kind of the individuated feeling of, or the individuated expression of God's love and light and consciousness. And that's kind of what shines through the window of the causal body, which is not yet on this diagram, and gives for this sort of individuation, the spark of the Creator that we could call the soul, or the I am, the individual I am. And this is the point from which we typically feel that we are observing the thoughts and the world, the physical world and the subtle world, or the mental world. But if you sort of enter that witness, if you become aware of that I am, and you begin to peel it from even more of the associations and the layers of the other bodies that the other bodies have given to it, then you start to really kind of be left ultimately with a purified I am, the I am without associations. And then it's Nisargadatta says it's, I'm paraphrasing, but something along the lines of, when you stay with the I am, eventually it will settle down and merge with the universal I am, or the universal knowledge. And that's kind of the step between the witness, or that point of view symbol, the third symbol from the right or left. It's the difference between that and the sort of satellite dish shape, the portion of a circle shape. That's the second one from the left. Which represents God. It represents the fourth body. It represents the God state, where the I am is no longer contaminated, so to speak. It's no longer enclosed by feelings of the physical body, or the subtle body, or even the causal body ultimately, where it really just recognizes its own non-local, non-dual, non-polarized unity, consciousness, love, light, bliss, freedom, formlessness. It can rest in that. It's very subtle, so the mind-based consciousness has trouble honing in on it, typically. And that's where the next session came in, or the previous session, session 4, where I wanted to explain in greater depth the function and relevance and potential value of the causal body. So if you can pull up the diagram with the bodies. Let me know when it's up. Yep. Okay. So in the next session, which was session 4, I added bodies to the initial diagram. So I didn't talk about the causal body, I don't think, in the third session. Maybe I hinted at it. But in the fourth session, I went all in on describing the causal body because I think it's one of the most misunderstood stages of self-realization oriented meditations or enlightenment oriented meditations. And once you have a clear understanding of the causal body, your meditations are going to be much clearer, much more fun in a way, because now you kind of know what you're getting yourself into and you know the function and purpose of it. Plus, it can be used as an intermediate sort of stage between the mind and that God essence in the form of the witness, and ultimately free of all location in the form of God, or in the formlessness of God, in the non-form of God, in that non-local, non-dimensional, just pure love, light, isness, Godness, allness, the essence, the substratum of all potential manifestations. And yet, in its own state, it's not really aware of any manifestations. It can be. It can filter back down through the bodies. It can witness the other bodies, and it is the only thing that ever witnesses all the other bodies. But it never becomes, from its own vantage point, it never becomes engaged with anything that appears. It is its own light. It is its own love and light and consciousness. So, understanding the causal body, that which kind of is our most immediate experience when we manage to quiet or stop the mind. When we stop thinking about the world and our perceptions and our feelings and emotions, boom, and we just kind of come to a standstill, the space between two thoughts, if you will. You're kind of aware of nothing. You're aware of sort of a presence, but the presence is like the presence of nothing. The presence of sort of a blankness, a space-like darkness. Again, not darkness as in a negative, just darkness as a neutral term, as a technical term, as in an absence of object perceptions being illuminated by consciousness. So it's like all the mental and physical objects stop appearing within your sense of self, within your consciousness. And what you're left with is pure awareness that's not yet aware of its pure awareness, the pure I am. But it's like the awareness that's still looking outward, but because the physical and the mental worlds have ceased to come into view, you're not paying attention, you've transcended, for that moment anyway, the physical and the mental bodies and their realms. Now your consciousness, it's still forward-facing. So now what it's looking at is the absence of the mental and the physical world, which is like pure space, but without lights yet, or maybe a little bit of light, typically. If you stabilize in that nothingness, if you begin to enjoy it, begin to explore it, as if you're in a dark room and it doesn't matter what way you're looking, but still you're kind of looking like, wow, darkness, whoa. It doesn't matter where you look, it's all darkness. But the act of being curious about it and being in awe of it will help you stabilize in a nothingness, which is easier for most people than to stabilize in awareness aware of itself, which initially feels like the witness, but as the witness deepens and deepens, it is revealed to be beyond any sense of location or individuation. It kind of, it's like the gates open up to this hard to describe feeling of wee, unity with all, love and with all, just like boom, this powerful, all-pervasive awareness, love, light, which I call the God state, or in this system it's called the fourth body, the great causal body. Now the causal body causes the subtle and the physical bodies. And it's sort of where all the impressions retreat back into and then emerge back out to, in terms of like new lives or a new day even. Like when you come back out of deep sleep, it's similar. You come back into your waking life, and the subtle and the physical bodies are once again part of your consciousness. And they re-express what has been stored. You don't have, anytime you go to deep sleep and then you come back the next day into a waking state, it's not like all your memories are erased. It's not like all your impressions and everything you've ever learned and your intuitions are gone. They're still there. You're effectively the same person. And this is kind of all stored in the causal body. But it's not illuminated in the typical sense. We're not conscious of it. We're veiled from this. It's like the great unconscious space or field where all data is secretly held in storage, if you will. And they re-emerge in the form of the subtle body and the physical body and their worlds. So you could also see that as sort of, if you adhere to the philosophy of reincarnation, you could say that when you die, you basically retreat to that space, and these impressions that are latent will find a new vehicle to re-express these impressions and these desires that are sort of in a frozen or latent state in the causal body. And then they manifest in a more active version as the subtle body or the mind, and the physical body as a means to further express and experience its imbalances and its lessons and all that. So just like when you go to sleep, it's kind of the space you retreat to when you enter deep sleep, and the physical world ceases and the dream world ceases, and you're in deep sleep. But now if you bring this deep sleep-like state of the causal body into your waking awareness, by basically stopping thoughts, boom, there's this nothingness. If you get anchored in this nothingness, it's typically for most people easier to do than to get anchored in immediately pure love, light, bliss. So to avoid yourself from sort of getting despondent or disappointed or jaded or impatient with your own process, find a joy, find a curiosity, find an awe and an interest. Build an interest in this causal body, because it already gives you great mastery over the physical and the subtle realms. You already feel more free. You already feel way more transcendent. You already feel more eternal. You already begin to realize certain things, download certain things into the subtle body, where it then becomes recognized as a download. And so you're already channeling also more knowledge and information into the subtle body, even though the causal body itself, the state, if you're really in that state itself, it is sort of characterized by a feeling of not knowing anything. But ironically, that not knowing anything is where all the information is drawn from. And then it channels into the subtle body, and then the subtle body expresses it through the physical body, and then it becomes a seemingly physical action. So, it's kind of a summary of the last 4 sessions. Today, I want to answer quite a few of your questions. And yeah, I'll just start doing that, actually. And I typically go off on a tangent, like I always do, once I read a few questions. So forgive me if I don't actually get to answer so many questions. But all the questions are always in the field, and somehow they often do get answered. Is the causal body the same as presence in Trinfinity Academy? Yes and no. Presence is originally the I am itself, meaning the God state, the great causal body. Because that's the only substance for anything to be made out of. It is this combination of awareness or free will, not free will in the way people typically think of it. People have a very limited understanding of free will. So forgive me for using these words, but I use those words. So a combination of free will or awareness, love, Love as in the innate basic knowledge of unity, which then kind of forms this formless field or basis that is intelligently endowed with that awareness and that free will. And now it sort of forms this formless basis of pure love energy. It has nothing to do yet with personal love or romantic love. It's just sheer love. It's just, mm. Because you see, in those stages of creation, the very early stages, the earliest manifestation of awareness and then love, there is not yet anything to be distracted by. There's no sense of other. So there's an innate recognition of unity. And that is what love is. Love is what is felt, or love is the consequence, or love is what immediately follows the recognition of unity. So in a sense, you could say on a very macroscopic, macrocosmic level, like universal level, like the original manifestation out of the absolute, of the God state, when the God state was formed, if you will, how the principle of the God state was formed. Once that awareness, once infinity became aware, then what's the result of that awareness when there's no objects yet, there's no appearances, there's no illusions, and therefore there's no sense of separation, there's no sense of me or mine or this or that. The natural feeling result or energy result from that intrinsic knowledge of unity, of infinite unity, must be love. We call it love. I mean, it's just a term we use. It's not the word. Nothing I point to has anything to do with the word that I use to point to it. Very important to realize. I'm describing states of truth and consciousness and direct experience. And I'm using words to get you to look in that direction and find out for yourself. Love, though, just sheer love. Pure. Woo. And then, just as it's hard to focus on the God state when you're engaged in the mind, once you're engaged in the God state, it's equally as hard to focus on the mind sometimes. So it's like you have to cloak yourself again. You have to step down your consciousness, at least a portion of it, not all of it, just a portion of it, to be able to then be more focused. Sometimes the bliss and the love and the light can kind of absorb you, which is typically what they describe as samadhi. It doesn't matter. It's all these stupid terms. So, anyway. Hey. Part of the reason I smoke cigars, actually, the nature in them, the nature element in the cigars, kind of has a grounding effect on my bodies. So, because any substance has also all the bodies, by the way. So tobacco, leaf, for example, or any part of nature or any object, it's not just tobacco leaf in the physical. It also has a subtle body. It also has a causal body. It also has the God state, which is uniform throughout all bodies. But it has that unique frequency in all these levels or dimensionalities of being. So if I'm smoking a cigar, say, for example, I'm not just absorbing some physical chemicals or components. It is that too. There's also a physical energy exchange, but it also is a quote-unquote lovemaking or exchange, energy exchange, just like eating food is. But it's also that at subtler levels. It's also that exchange on the subtle body, causal body, and God state even. So, but I find that the effect of smoking cigars is like helps me ground myself, be more sort of not that I have to be super careful that I take off or anything like that. You know, it's not. I'm quite grounded. I'm quite able to stay focused here. But like being social, for example, and smoking cigars are one of the ways that I enjoy being more functional in the physical world, like being more productive, I should say. You'd be functional regardless. It's just that you wouldn't probably do as much if you were just absorbed in the love and the light, which is also fine. But I still have this sense of a particular blueprint, duty for this incarnation, for this subtle body and physical body. So there's a balance for me of continuing to give a portion of my consciousness to those bodies in particular ways and learn certain things within this illusion. Anyway, where was I? Love. Yep, I should not go there anymore. Let me just get to your questions. I think that's the best thing to do. Oh yeah, thank you. So presence. Okay, so the presence. The only presence there is the presence of the great causal body. It's the presence, that's presence itself, pure presence, pure awareness, love, light. All that together I call God, the collective of the first three creations out of infinity, being awareness, then love, and then love producing intelligently using free will or awareness, the intelligence of awareness, and using the intelligent energy of love, then started to form patterns or rhythms, if you will, that then produced what we know of as light. Light in the most pure original sense. And then that further distorted itself using more and more free will, cascading down, if you will, like an organization from CEO to top level managers to employees to workers, etc. Kind of like that. And what we call us typically is like a portion of that organization of free will that's splintered off, yet never separate expression of the one infinite creator in form. So everything is made of awareness, love, light, or you could say presence, consciousness, or you could say God, or Brahman, because there is nothing else. That is the sole basis that appeared. And so everything that is here is produced, is an illusion of that original illusion, the original illusion of awareness, love, light. The most transparent illusions to the one infinite reality of the Absolute. So, is the causal body the same as what I call presence in Trinfinity Academy? Yes, because everything is. No, because it's not directly what we would call presence. But here's the thing. Presence is present in all the bodies. So when you're playing with a physical tool, let's say a hammer or whatever, or you're eating a physical apple, that is presence in the form of the physical illusion. Now, if you're having thoughts or a daydream or an imagination or you're planning out your life or whatever it is that you're engaging the subtle body or the mental body or the mind in, the intellect and the senses and the desires and the imagination, all that, that it has its own presence too. Presence is presence no matter what, in the form of no matter what. It's just that different levels, if you will, or different shades that it takes on. So the causal body for sure is presence, but it's presence experienced as the veil of nothingness, or as the body of space, of emptiness, of space, of the foundation for the other bodies. So yes and no. Yes, because everything is presence. No, because I wouldn't call the causal body, I wouldn't equate it with the term presence, because presence it essentially goes beyond that, because the I am, the pure I am, the God state is also presence. And that's really the foundation of presence, where everything else comes from, and all the other bodies rely on that presence. Is the causal body, by Drew Michael, Facebook, is the causal body essentially the same thing that Buddhism concepts called present moment awareness. Again, with the causal body, those familiar perhaps with some of the Ati Yoga or Dzogchen teachings, I would equate it, with all due respect for all the different lineages and stuff, absolutely don't take this as a claim of knowledge or authority. My interpretation would be that what they call the universal ground of traces is the causal body. They make a distinction between the universal ground of traces, which they say, or some of the teachers say, many people mistake to be the ultimate sphere or the ultimate body or the Dharmakaya, which in my terminology here would most equate to the God state or the fourth body. So they make a distinction too between the third and the fourth body, if you will. And they call, at least in my opinion, they call the causal body the universal ground of traces. And they call then the God state the ultimate body, or the Dharmakaya, or the ultimate sphere. So what they call present moment awareness, or maybe mindfulness and stuff like that, is that the causal body? No, it's not that it is the causal body, because one can have present moment awareness on an apple, on a dream or a thought, or on nothingness. So again, the true presence awareness is yourself in the form of God, in the form of awareness, love, light, the first manifestation, that free agency, that ability to be and know. That ability to be and know, and consequently learn and discern and choose and evolve, can either be present to something or kind of half asleep or fully asleep, if you will. So present moment awareness is simply to become aware of the now. Now, if you become aware of the now enough, so to speak, or present enough to the now, it's like the physical and the subtle worlds just no longer have enough fuel. You're not distracted enough by them for them to really appear as much. So then typically, yes, that can help you penetrate into the state of nothingness, which by its very characteristic of not having any of the contents would be experienced as the now, or being present, or the present moment, because it kind of has it's not, but it kind of has a timeless quality to it. Compared to the thoughts of the mind and the actions of the body, it definitely has a foreverness quality to it, or like a more eternal, ancient, stable, changeless quality to it. Because there is simply no observation of objects, at least not by our incarnate mind, because we're veiled from that knowledge in most cases. But yeah, if you have an awareness of parallel or past lives and all that stuff, then this would be, in my opinion, where that information is drawn from. It's from that sort of causal realm. And therefore, again, that's why I think they call it the universal ground of traces. It's where all the traces are reborn. It's like the ground, universal ground of all the traces that are left from all the experiences that have already occurred. So it's like the database of knowledge. And when it's time to activate it, it becomes known as objects, a series of objects by the subtle body or the mind or the intellect. And then it executes it in the physical. Mark Boston, Facebook. Dear Bentinho, thank you for your clear elaborations. Is it possible to directly know these more subtle causal bodies and the absolute, between parentheses, when the physical body is experiencing chronic pain, or when in continuous physical danger, such as self-isolating with an abuser? If so, is there any guidance or insight you could offer to those who struggle to have undisturbed periods of meditation and self-inquiry? Is it possible to directly know these more subtle bodies while the physical body is experiencing chronic pain? Yes, absolutely. Now, yes, it may be a little more challenging, it may be more distracting, but there is one benefit to the chronic pain, is you have more motivation than the average Joe. So that can kind of make up for it being more challenging, because the subtle and the physical bodies are distracting you more, or put more heat on the fire, so to speak, or turn up the heat, and therefore it can be more distracting. Someone once asked me what to do when there's physical pain, and there just seems to be no way around it. And now there's different approaches to this. In general, I would suggest to investigate what the cause of it is in the psyche, the metaphysical cause. But that path aside for a second. Let's say you're in a situation where you just have to surrender to the physical pain in the way it is. First of all, it's a great lesson in patience and surrender and faith. But if you want to give yourself some relief, the answer that I gave was focus there where the pain is not. Not saying this is always easy, but it is possible. So when you have pain, without adopting the view that you should avoid all pain, because pain is a great learning tool. So again, this is not about suppressing or bypassing or avoiding, but there's also nothing wrong with giving yourself a break and resting into peace when you've experienced pain for a while. So pain has a location. Pain has a body in which it exists. Therefore, there's also a location or a vibrational location or a state of consciousness location where the pain is not. If you're aware of the pain, it means there's also a place where the pain is not. I hope that makes sense intuitively. So see if you can identify where, quote unquote, the pain exists in your awareness, where the pain appears in your consciousness, and then focus on a different area of your consciousness, a different location, or a different plane, or a different state. But there is a state / location or place / realm or plane or body where the pain is not. And the causal body is such a body where the pain is not. The physical and the emotional pain is not in the causal body. So it has a cool relationship to chronic pain because it offers relief from the chronic pain. Now, as soon as you're back in the physical and the subtle body focus, it may be there again, although often it's also alleviated quite a bit. Sometimes it's healed altogether because the causal body, even though you're not aware of what's happening, there is a lot of sort of downloads happening into your subtle body. So there is a communication exchange simply by resting yourself in that position consciously, in that state of the causal body consciously. It's like a lot of floodgates open and a lot of the energetic blockages of the chakras and stuff, they balance themselves out quite naturally. So it doesn't always have to mean you're bypassing pain if you're choosing to go to the space of deliberate nothingness, conscious emptiness, conscious space like ignorance, unknowing your pain, unknowing your thoughts about the pain, unknowing your feelings and emotions about the pain. And it can give great perspective so that when the mental and physical views come back into view, you have so much more perspective. Plus, you've realized, you've experienced more and more how you're not the bodies that are in pain. So this gives you great confidence and a sense of sort of a natural distance almost. Not separation, just like distance within unity, distance within oneness. And it's great, it's very encouraging. You feel free, you feel like kind of a master of your bodies and your experience more and more. Miriam Enim on Facebook. Is there any place for intention? Because if I would use intention, by the way, the diagram is up now. Cool. All right. Is there any place for intention? Because if I would use intention, then I would already have given intention meaning. Or can it be like the doorknob, just there and not distracting? She's referring to something I mentioned, I think, in the third session, to illustrate that meaning is optional and how biased we are with our meanings and how much it distracts us, is that you're much more focused on or distracted by my voice right now than you are by the doorknob that's in the room you're in. Both my voice as well as the doorknob, they're evenly present in your room, in your space, in your consciousness. But one, you place all your attention on, and the other, you don't even notice exists. It gives you no experience. It does not register. But as soon as you give meaning to the doorknob, let's say you just bought it for $1,000. It's a very special doorknob. It's an antique. And you've just installed it. And you're a 4-year-old child who has no notion of all those meanings and significances. They just squeeze it, break it, and turn it around. You would feel something, even though the doorknob has no meaning. The doorknob doesn't say, I am antique, I am special, I am worth $1,000. There's only 2 of me in the whole world. The doorknob has no knowledge of meaning. It's absolutely given to us. The whole universe is quiet when we don't give it meaning. Yeah, the curtain doesn't say, hello, I'm a curtain. The stars don't say, hello, I'm a star. It's that quiet. It's pure vibrational appearances. So meaning gives focus, but also can distract us. So that's what she's referring to with the doorknob. So is there any place for intention? Because if I would use intention, then I would already have given intention meaning. Or can it be like the doorknob, just there and not distracting? Can intention just be there and not distract me? In a field of 1,000 suns, there is unconditional love. So in there, no need for attention. It is. Would it be helpful to have a loving intention in any way? Or would it distort the outcome of something by not letting it be super free? Beautiful question. Love is always a good intention. It's just that at a certain stage, love is automatic, so it's no longer an intention, it's a reality. But up until total love is a reality, and for the moments that it's not a total reality, even if it was for a few seconds or a few minutes or a few years, anytime it's not your direct experience, it's great to come from that intention. And the more you do have the direct experience of the field of God and love, which is really the only space where you truly know what love is in the 4th body, the great causal body of the pure universal I am, the pure existence, consciousness, bliss, love, light. That's where love is realized. So then you don't need an intention because it's there. It's like you're already in Rotterdam and you have an intention to be in Rotterdam. Makes no sense. But if you're not in Rotterdam, but you want to get there, it may make sense to have the intention to get there. So it's kind of like that. Same with the intention to fall asleep. I intend to fall asleep. I intend to fall asleep. Once you are asleep, you're not still intending to fall asleep. Similar with unconditional love. I hope that answers your question. Patrick Pfeiffer on Facebook. Question in bold. Oh, the question is in bold. Okay. Thanks, Jacqueline. Or Corey. I've been talking to some others in the community who seem to have a similar issue. An intense fear, here's the question, because this is in bold. An intense fear that spontaneously arises while meditating deeply, deeply upon nothingness, or the causal body, as Bentinho insightfully pointed at in session 4. What is this? Any pointers? So again, an intense fear that spontaneously arises while meditating deeply upon nothingness, or the causal body. What is this? Any pointers? It feels as if, and this is also speculation, that upon the boundary between the causal body, or the nothingness, and the supercausal body, or the God realization, there is a visceral fear that yearns for understanding and ultimately transcendence. There's a visceral fear that yearns for understanding and ultimately transcendence. Like a gatekeeper. It feels as if it is asking for a complete letting go of all attachments. Sorry. And ideas of identities. It seems to be a glass ceiling in my practice these days. I practice meditating 2.5 hours daily for the past few years now. But now I have a much better map, which I'm incredibly grateful for, thanks to Bentinho. And so this fear is happening almost daily now. bold. Any insight as to what the fear may be. I've also been applying the question, what would I have to believe in order to feel this way? But even after feeling confident it has been resolved, it seems to remain. Maybe something that can be circumnavigated with more neti-neti. Any insights would be deeply appreciated. Thank you. Quite the question. Lovely. I love the word gatekeeper. And yes, the gatekeeper it's like the eye of the needle. It's like the narrow doorway. It's like the window. And there's an instinctive knowledge that if I pass through this window, I will no longer be me in the way that I know myself to be, in the way that I've attached myself to be. Now, for the first time ever, you'll be actually you, or much closer to it. But because you've associated with your thoughts and your ideas and your beliefs for so long, all these things don't fit through the eye of the needle. They don't fit through the small window. All that fits is that pure element, that pure spark of you that was projected all the way into all these illusions. And now you're coming back to that portal, that gatekeeper, that eye of the needle. And the only thing that fits back through is your essence. None of the things that you've adopted or accumulated over time. Now, this is not necessarily that helpful of an image, although it's quite accurate, because it paints a picture of having to let go. And the thing is, there is a core to this teaching that is beyond even the need to let go. It is the realization that what we're looking for truly is already realized. That God state is already here, whether or not we go through the eye of the needle. And that's sort of a way to bypass having to go through the needle, or at least you think you're bypassing. You're just passing through a different kind of eye of the needle that doesn't seem as threatening. You're adjusting yourself to the state of your true self as it already is. And so naturally, you'll renounce your attachments. Naturally, you'll be freed more and more and more every time you give it back to the God state. By recognizing that the God state's already here, you don't have to go through a portal or a gatekeeper and make this profound life-altering choice in order to then explode into God and like lose yourself for the rest of your life. And this is how we give meaning to things. It then becomes distracting. So lessen that meaning, realize that you're already God, so there's no going through the eye of the needle. There's no letting go of attachments. You already are God. It doesn't matter what you think you are free of or not free of. The essence of the basis of this experience, the truth of this moment is already timelessly free. If you can recognize that and go straight to that recognition, it makes redundant the need to do any kind of action of letting go, any kind of decision. No decision needs to be made, because you're simply recognizing, you're resolving all your delusions and all your meanings naturally and very harmlessly, very in a friendly way, by giving it back to the recognition that the essence of all appearances is already timelessly free. Well, so then there's nothing to let go of, is there? It's not a concept. It's not a mental thought, or it shouldn't stay there. It's the it's the natural automatic resolve. Is that intrinsic awareness that liberates just by being recognized. This intrinsic awareness remembers itself, and thus everything that's not true is rendered illusory or not real. So don't make it too big of a story, but yes, at the end of the soul's journey, if you will, where the soul is ready to kind of go back into the God state, similar to how the witness is ready to recognize that its source is actually a universality, a universal oneness. And so there's the illusion of the loss of self, but it's not really there. The loss of self doesn't exist because nothing that's ever created can ever be lost. And so in the realization of the absolute, one actually realizes that the loss of self in the God state was also an illusion. There is only me as you've always already been. But that's for another course. That's a couple steps beyond where I actually want to go in this session. So, Yes, there is a symbolic, metaphysically, somewhat accurate, somewhat true stage of going beyond the causal body and into the God state, and it can fear us when there's so much light. So you just have to adjust to it. Just generally adjust to it. Gently, gradually adjust to it. Don't force yourself into anything. Just see that the God state is already the God state. Everything is already fine. You're just holding on to an illusion. You're already free. And wouldn't you really want to shine as the sun? Would you really not want that? Don't you really not want that? Like, for what reason? And can you not still perform your duties while you're radiating as the sun? Maybe you get distracted for 10 seconds like I did when I started talking about love. But that's no big deal. I'm still quite efficient at everything I do. In fact, I'm more efficient than I used to be. So you still learn and you can still interact with the bodies, but you begin to radiate from within with this natural radiance, this self-luminosity of God knowing itself more and more deeply, more and more. And that's the accumulation of spiritual mass. Anyway, I hope this helps. Don't worry about it. Just continue your practice. Don't be afraid. Don't be so afraid. It's a good state. Go recognize your unity. You can always step back out of it. Don't worry. No, you can actually. You can't step back out of it. So it's not a joke. I'm not trying to fool you here. Just having some fun. Is there any correlation with brain waves, alpha, beta, theta, gamma, delta, with the bodies or veils in meditation? Roughly, but I wouldn't limit it to that. If I had to describe it, I would say the physical body focus / the physical realm focus would be mostly beta with a little bit of alpha. Again, don't pin me down to this. It's kind of subjective guesstimate. If I'd had to place the mental body or the subtle body in this, I would say the brain waves most active in the brain in response to your consciousness being focused on the subtle plane exclusively. It also depends how much is there an interrelationship or connection between the stimulus of the physical body and the stimulus within the subtle body, because there's always a blended percentage, right? So, but if you were to be exclusively in the subtle body, you'd find mostly alpha wavelengths and some theta, depending sort of on the depth of the meditation on it, if you will, or that, because every body has also grosser and subtler levels, if you will. Then the causal body would be somewhere in the range of theta and delta. God being a combination of delta and gamma. That may not make sense, but it makes sense to me. So another way to see gamma would be that there is sort of an interactiveness or like a open portal between all the bodies. There's sort of a free-flowing communication, a simultaneity. That would express itself as gamma as well. There's free-flowing communication. You're not isolated on the physical focus or this focus. It's like, whoa, there's actually a free flow of information. So that type of a flow state, where there's up and down communication happening freely, would express itself most likely as a gamma brain state. Ma Prem Arya, Facebook. Is it possible to access this state of nothingness or the God state with the techniques that focus on relaxing the body and tuning into its wisdom beyond our mind? If you don't believe so, what is then the state of flow that dancers or athletes experience? Everything is possible, but is it possible to access the state of nothingness or the God state with the techniques that focus on relaxing the body and tuning into its wisdom beyond our mind. What is the state of flow that dancers, athletes experience? So when you're in the flow state, it's kind of an unconscious usage of the state you're actually tuned into. It's a quasi-conscious. It's almost like it just happens to you. It's like, oh, cool, I'm just kind of a witness of this flow state, rather than being completely sort of focused upon or absorbed in the state or body or stage of consciousness that you wish to be tuned into. However, is it possible? Yes, it's totally possible. If you want to use the permission slip of using the body and tuning into its wisdom beyond the mind, it's a bit of a roundabout way, but if that works for you, then that's great. It's just kind of like romantic is a roundabout way to feeling loved. Romantic love is a roundabout way to feeling loved. So too, this whole like worshipping of the body with the sense of sort of almost a fetish attention on it, and worshipping it and like, ooh, which is a little bit of the sense I'm getting from you in this question, that you have some allegiance to those types of consciousnesses or philosophies. Then I'd say just see if you can begin to see beyond that, because it's still giving power away to something. It's not a direct usage of these teachings so much. But is it possible? It's definitely possible. But just know that it's a permission slip. You're just using your own meanings. You're giving the body meaning in a certain way, and you're giving power away to that meaning. But because that meaning is in alignment with your intention to be in a flow state or to be connected to the nothingness or the God state, then of course it will happen, because the intention is what's direct. You just believe it's going through the wisdom in the body that transcends the mind. And this is sort of just your personal fetish or preference or symbolization. And so if it works for you, by all means use it, but you can begin to use it more and more directly if you so want to. But nothing wrong with it. It's just not as direct as it can be. But yes, you can, while you're dancing, while you're talking, while you're driving your car, you can recognize nothingness. You can recognize, well, let me not do the driving the car one, because I might get sued here. So not while you're driving a car or operating any dangerous vehicles, but in very harmless environments and in very harmless physical actions and relationships, you can recognize the space of nothingness within which it's all occurring, the support, the foundation, the empty basis for it to appear in. And you can recognize the light of awareness itself, that quality of clarity or consciousness which transcends even space. Yes, you can stay tuned into that while your body is talking. In fact, it's happening right now, in truth. In truth, you are God looking through all those bodies, and you're witnessing your mouth speaking. So you don't really have to do much. The intelligence aligns itself. By whatever you're tuned into, your mind and body will express at the right timing for that to happen. Because they have their own intelligence too, to kind of operate. Just like the body can sleepwalk without the mind fully awake. There's an intelligence to what we do here. That is sort of innate, just like the biology has an intelligence. Everything is a manifestation and appearance of intelligence in the form of energy fields and rotations and rhythms and interactions. So trust that. Trust the intelligence that's innate in the body. Not to go back too much to the previous question, and trust in the intelligence that's innate in the subtle body. And by whatever you're tuned into, if you're tuned into the God state, then your body and your mind will naturally be in a flow state with whatever they're interacting with in their own planes. But your awareness, or at least a percentage of that awareness, can be rooted in this awareness of awareness, or this awareness of the God essence. And you can play with that. You can focus more in that state, and you'll become less aware of what you're saying. But still, nothing that you're saying is suddenly not making any sense. It's not like suddenly it turns to gibberish and you don't know what's going on. At least that's not been my experience. So it's like if I'm tuning, let's say the majority, like 95% of my conscious attention if I absorb it to the God state, or even 100, then apparently I'm still talking, but I'm not really aware that I'm talking. Even though I know it's happening, but it's like that becomes such an afterthought. Because now what's vibrantly in your face? It's like the doorknob. You don't notice the doorknob when you're listening to me, but the doorknob is there. At any point, you can look at the doorknob, recognize it's still there, it's doing its job, it's great, it's fine, it's broken, and it's cost you $1,000, but it's fine, it's still there. Similarly, it's like you don't even notice your body because you're not giving any meaning to the mind or the body or your interactions in that moment. You're giving all the significance, if you will, to your self-essence, your true nature. And so this love and this light and this awareness and this bliss comes in, and you can make available a portion of that consciousness to be aware of the interactions that you're having, while maintaining a portion of your consciousness sort of rooted or plugged in to that awareness of the God essence. And you just become naturally more adept at this as you practice. It's just a natural quality that we all have intrinsically, innately. It's got nothing to do with mental capacity, really. Not really. So everyone can experience that simultaneity and that sort of free flow between the different states of physicalized forms, subtle energetic forms, nothingness or the space foundation, and then the brightness or the clarity of pure consciousness itself, that universal awareness, love, light, which enabled everything to begin with, which is the core of all the illusions. It's the primordial illusion upon which all the consequent illusions are based. It's like the mirage itself, within which you can have all these things that you're witnessing. It is like the dream itself, within which you can dream all kinds of things. But the dream itself is the original illusion. It's the foundation of everything else that's appearing within the dream. So the dream itself, creation itself, experience itself, that is God in essence. And God can either be aware of what's dreaming, or if it's aware of itself, then it's just aware of it being the dream, or it being the creation, or it being the allness. And when it focuses more inward within itself, on the different forms and topics, it will produce these bodies that has their functionality and that relate to the planes that they correspond to vibrationally. Jamie Sismaria Thornhill on Facebook asked, within which of the 5 bodies, there are no 5 bodies, there's 4 bodies, in this method anyway, there's 4 bodies. The 5th is the absolute, which is not a body, it's a reality. The 4 bodies are illusory, ultimately. They are the creation, they are the illusion, the grand experience, the grand experiment. Those are the veils, those are the vehicles. The original, true, absolute, infinite reality cannot be described as a body, because the body has both the function to function, as well as the function to veil the absolute from itself. So there's 4 bodies that cover the absolute, or that are expressions or functions of the absolute. God, the causal, the subtle, and the physical, or the gross. So within which of the 4 bodies, does a person experience connection with intuition, higher guidance, and or intelligent infinity? Within which of the 5 bodies does a person experience connection with? That would always be the subtle body. The person is the product of the subtle body. The subtle body is where we interpret all of our intuitions and our visions and our downloads and our insights. Some of these come from the subtle planes. Some of these come from the physical planes. If I observe a physical object flying through space, I deduce that there's gravity on this planet. I learn about gravity as I grow up, and I balance my body. I fall over, I stand back up. I observe through the physical, and my subtle body is getting the downloads from the physical body, if you will. It's assessing information that it's retrieved from the physical body. Similarly, you can retrieve information from other aspects or components of the subtle body, like when you're assessing different things or memories that you already have, and intuitions of certain sort of parallel planes within the subtle body. Or when you kind of go deeper, let's say you go into sort of life regression kind of thing, and you're trying to access memories beyond this life, beyond this mind, beyond this personality, then when you're getting some of that data, you experience it from within the subtle body when it's taking shape. Unless you're just resting with the direct vibration and experience of it. But as soon as it takes shape and knowledge, in the sense of you being able to know it and analyze it and use it, it becomes part of the subtle realm. So it's like a download, or it's like a compression of the original information. It's like the song you're playing out of your radio is not the same as the wavelengths that are in the causal body or the etheric fields, right? So you're tuning into the etheric fields with your the frequency or radio waves. You're picking up on it with your radio, and the sound that comes out is your interpretation, the radio's interpretation, production into form, into something audible for the senses and the intellect to enjoy. But in its original state, it's nothing but vibration. But you can't perceive that with your subtle body. So even if you're downloading something or accessing intuition from the causal body or beyond, you're going to be experiencing its manifestation or symbolization or understanding through the subtle body. Especially if you're still giving a lot of meaning to intuition and synchronicity and all that. If that's still super important to you and you give a lot of your power away to these things as confirmations for your divinity, when you are always divine and you transcend synchronicity, you transcend symbolism, you transcend dreams, you transcend intuition. You are beyond all that. But if you're still giving that meaning as if you are a person caught up in that whole game, as part of a big universe outside yourself, then you are definitely going to experience only the tail end of those downloads, the symbolization of it that you're familiar with into senses and sounds and sights and pictures and labels and understanding. You're not going to experience it in its own native state, because you're giving meaning to yourself as if you're a person that needs synchronicity and downloads and intuition and flow state and dancing and this and that. And so you're so focused from the subtle level, you're so identified with the subtle body, that you're going to only receive information through that veil and interpret it and always misinterpret it to some degree because of the meaning given to it. So for the majority of people, we experience intuition, insight, and higher density states unless we're actually in the meditation itself and we're focused exclusively in that state and we're not dragged down by our meanings given to our egos. Then we're directly contacting that actual transcendent state of consciousness, transcendent to what we're used to. In its own state, it's not transcendent to itself. It's just natural, it's automatic. But for us, it's transcendent, because it transcends what we're usually identified with. So you can resonate in that and become functional as the causal body or the God body, where this is why you become different. You become not human anymore. It's because human can only be classified as the physical and the subtle bodies. When you begin to really directly operate from the higher bodies, no longer needing interpretations and symbolizations of these subtler states, then you begin to operate with them directly, which is like having a whole other body. Not just having a body and a mind, but now you also have that etheric field of space or nothingness, which contains all information yet seems dark. You have this whole other higher body that activates, so you're no longer a typical mind-body kind of entity. You start to use spirit directly. You start to use consciousness directly at different stages. Then you can experience an intuition at its own level. And then you'll still have knowledge of it. You can still translate it into the subtle body, and you can give it words, and you can write it down, turn it into a book, teach about it, whatever. You can still do that, but you've already understood it at its own level before you need any words, any labels. The insight is instantaneous. You don't need to unzip the package before the compressed file is decompressed. You don't even need to compress it. It's just there as it is, and you begin to know things more directly, develop a more direct relationship to what the person consciousness experiences as, oh, somewhere beyond myself. Let me download it. Now you're actually at the place from where it's downloaded from. So you're uploading it into your subtle body, you could say, almost. These are just analogies. But yeah, you can expand your consciousness if you stop giving so much meaning to your person, your ego, your tiny little world, and just relax and just trust in your capacity for infinity. Woo! You're so much bigger than you know. Don't play it too slow. Accept where you're at, but don't reinforce this is important and that's important and it needs to come through this way and through that body and blah, blah, blah. Just expand. Just trust the process. Trust yourself to be able to be present to whatever state that you're focused on. And you're able to sense that body, that state, and function from that level more and more. Where in these 5 stages are you being when you talk to us? For Nora Lovis. Ternesvik Seterbo. Wow, I actually tried that. Thank you for your question. Beautiful name. Sorry I butchered it. Where in these 5 stages are you being when you talk to us? There's a free flow happening, and there's a simultaneity of it all. This is a really tough concept to explain. It's one of the subtlest concepts to grok, to understand, and you need direct experience to get it, but I call it true simultaneity. And it's the simultaneity of those states or stages or levels of consciousness, meaning they're simultaneously available. And so it's like a computer using both the motherboard as well as the software, as well as the display to display it. Or the software is kind of the mental body or the solid body. What's on display is the physical, and the motherboard is like the causal. And then the computer case itself would be, I mean, I'm going a little nuts with the analogy now, but that would be God, what it's made of, the substance that it's made of, the microchips and stuff, the metal that it's made of would be the God state. And the absolute would be what even enabled the computer to be made in the first place. And so there is an openness to all these. There's like an open portal or channel throughout all these stages that I can, to a great extent, access at will. And to a great extent, they're all operational automatically. So there's certain connections that have been strengthened over time where because of that there's a free flow, and I can take the elevator up and down real quick without really losing the overall feeling of the simultaneity of it. Wish I had a simpler answer for you, but I don't. I'm actually feeling this might be the end of the session. A little shorter than the others. Let's see if anything else comes to mind. Or maybe just take a deep breath. We'll do a little bit of a meditation. Then I'll close off with some silent sitting here for about 2 minutes. And then I'll get up and we'll end the broadcast. Thank you so much for being here. Again, I recommend you rewatch all the videos 1 through 5 so far. At your own pace, of course. You don't have to squeeze it all in before the next live stream on Wednesday. But yeah, just rewatch some of it and get acquainted with it. Become familiar with the content. There is no greater joy than to be exposed to these teachings in such a clear way when your desire is to realize what's spoken about. I've always experienced it as such a gift when it's been available to me. And sometimes it was the only thing that would carry me through a trench of confusion and doubt and angst. So just keep exposing yourself to this material if you're serious about it, if it's something that you want. If you're just kind of like spirituality shopping, that's fine too. But if this is really part of your heart's desire, Like I know it is for many of you, even those that don't know it. And sometimes you struggle, or you're confused, or you give too much meaning to appearances, and you give too much meaning to emotions. Therefore, you cannot embrace them as they are, and you have to either avoid them, change them, fight with them, know about them, instead of just unknow everything and trust everything back to the space from where it arose, back to the universal ground of traces, back to that peaceful space of no thing, that peaceful space of ignorance, unknow everything. And then bring awareness into it when you can, as much as possible. Recognize the awareness that illuminates both the nothingness as well as all the forms of this world and your thoughts. And just rest more and more in the nothingness and more in awareness as well if you can. Have an awareness of the nothingness and be aware of the fact that you're aware of the nothingness ultimately, which then allows you to be aware of the awareness that's aware of the nothingness. And then you can rest in the God state, which is super subtle, but brilliant, pristine and pure. And this is possible again for everyone. This is possible for you. My greatest wish for you is that you know this is possible for you, because I know that all you need to know is that this is possible for you in order for it to happen for you. I don't need to teach you anything really. It's helpful, but you just need to know that it's possible. You need to want it. And when you really want it and you know it's possible for you, it's just gonna drop in more so every day, every week, every month, every year. And 5 years from now, you will look back and you will not recognize yourself in the best possible way. In the meantime, I have found videos, information, teachers' voices, readings, scriptures to be extremely helpful. Now also extremely confusing to the scholar in me, the one who wanted to get it all right and perfect, and the teaching mind in me who wanted to distill all the concepts, compare all the concepts so that I could teach sort of a unified theory of spirituality, a comprehensive meta view that includes and incorporates the essential elements of all these paths and teachings and clarifies the paradoxes and contradictions between them. Which is part of the work that I'm working on currently, is to bring that out in a digestible format. That's just been my blueprint for this life. But as a result of that, I would go back and forth tirelessly between different teachings and teachers and words and concepts and meditate on it, experience it, then go back to what's the best word for this experience? Okay, let me go back to that experience. Oh yeah. Okay, the best word for this, for the average mind to get into it would be that term. But this is what they called it in the past. So if you find yourself struggling in that way, or maybe not quite in that way, but in just a more personal way of your emotions and your thoughts being confusing to you, and I've had those states a lot too, then please just watch these videos. Please, I know that you don't always feel like it. I know when you're depressed or that you're lethargic or you don't know what to do, you're confused, you just want to lay in bed maybe, or you want to do this, or you want to overeat, or whatever it is that you indulge in. Just give yourself this gift. Commit to, even when you're not feeling it, especially when you're not feeling it, when your vibration is low, you're unclear, you feel muddled, you don't feel quite connected to who you really are, you don't feel like you're radiating from within, you have an off day maybe, just carve out some time, even though you won't feel like it in that negative mood, because the negative mood will only attract negative thoughts and negative desires. So you gotta conquer that by right now, in a positive state, committing to yourself, writing it the fuck down somewhere, putting it in a frame, sending it to all your friends, whatever you need to do, is I promise to myself that when I feel off or low or depressed, low frequency, and I wish to reconnect to myself, but I don't seem to have access to it, and because I don't have access to that flow state and that connection to myself, where I seem to not have it, I'm attracting negative thoughts, and therefore I don't feel like going and watching a video about spirituality or enlightenment. But I promise to myself that I will. It's one of the fastest ways to get you out of those funks. Just continue to listen. And sometimes you have to listen for 3 hours a day. Sometimes you have to read a book for 2 hours straight before it drops in, but it will drop in, and it will help you liberate yourself. Something will click in deeper every time. And this is the way when you're struggling. And then when it's easier, it's sometimes even more difficult to stay on course because you get so distracted by all the fun stuff that you're attracting to yourself, which is all fine and good, but over time you mature and you realize there is no fun in anything that you're giving power away to. The fun is in seeing the spontaneous unfoldment of phenomena as they just appear right in front of you, filled with magic and intelligence and synchronicity, but without giving them meaning or needing them. It's just this free flow of generous energy, of love radiating and seeing itself reflected in form, in manifestation, in thoughts, in relationships, you name it, in the world, in chaos, in turbulence, in quarantine, in big lies from all the big organizations and all that stuff. And just look at the fun of that. Look at the hilarious hysterics of it. But don't give it any meaning. Like, stay centered. Know that the happiness is coming from what you are, not what you see. You see your thoughts, you see your body, you see the news, you see your governments, you see pharmaceutical companies, you see other people, you see relationships. So you're not them. So keep coming from this free place that's beyond the world. Don't be off this world, my friends. And don't let anyone fucking tell you can't do that or that that's bypassing. You can bypass things. That's not what I recommend. But in essence, understanding these teachings to their fullest extent in a balanced way has nothing to do with disassociation or bypassing. It's an absolute embrace. It's a welcoming of everything exactly as it is. It's a fearless, courageous, allowing everything to be as it is because I'm not giving it meaning anymore. Therefore, all thoughts and emotions and challenging feelings are welcome. They are allowed to be as they are. And what shines through, what illuminates them all, is this divine, godly awareness that traverses through the space body and then illuminates my mind, my intellect, my thoughts, my definitions, and the seemingly physical manifestation of my life. If you're a lazy meditator, just read. But read good stuff. Sorry, I can't recommend too much. But re-listen to these videos. Start by doing that. When you need it, when you feel like you can't connect to it, maybe you're like, nah, I don't want to watch a 2-hour long video on that and I have to pay attention. Do it. Watch it. That's the only time I would say that you should do something when you don't want to. Other than that, like, it's absolutely up to your free will, and of course this is too. But I'm encouraging you as a fellow journeyer who knows what that's like to be in a funk. I highly encourage you to go against your own desires when you're in a negative mood. It's kind of like, yeah, no, anyway, I'll leave that. So, yes, get yourself out of the funk by doing what you don't want to do. Whether it's an inspiring action, watching a video, reading a book of this material, just getting inspired, just tapping into a new level of your consciousness so that you can shift this sort of illusory solid identity you've built around yourself, which is so not what you are. It's so not what you are. It distorts your perception. And then you think it's real. Everything you think is real is not real. Pretty much. And you get used to that over time, and you become very skillful in interacting with the illusion of phenomena. Because that has been done millions and millions and millions and millions of times all across this creation. Consciousness knows how to interact with the bodies even once it sees through the illusion of them. There's this innate, intrinsic, this intelligence that just operates that becomes you more and more. The less you become a person, the more you become God. Yet you still have the body, so you can still speak, formulate thoughts, and walk around, and people will see you as they see everybody else and as they see themselves. But it's like Neo that's unplugged from the Matrix, and that plugs back in just to do a mission or something. It's quite the show. It's like a lifelong mission, lifelong video game interaction. Anyway, you don't have to be limited to this experience of yourself as defined by your thoughts and your society. You are free, you are fearless, you are eternal, you are unity consciousness, you are God. You are God with free will. God is free will, ultimately. There's nothing apart from you. Everything is accessible, you see, because there is no other substance but you for anything to be created out of. There's nothing other than that which is for anything to be made out of. So everything is accessible at some level. All right, enough for my advertisement for your enlightenment. I'll be quiet for a few minutes, and I'll be sending you lots of love and light from within the subtler bodies. From within the subtler bodies, you can reach into the other grosser bodies that also seem to not belong to you. You can actually begin to feel people's minds and bodies over distance. There's no distance, by the way. In the God body, there's no distance, which explains why you can reach everywhere from the God's point of view. It's like a higher dimension can reach into the dimensions that to the beings in the lower dimensions seems like mystery or magic. But your consciousness can touch, your intelligence can touch any body, any mind, anywhere in the universe, basically, hypothetically, no, well, realistically, but technically. And you can practice this with your immediate environment. You can touch this table from the inside out. You can feel it. Therefore, you can know it at a whole nother level. You can know its subtle body. You can know the causal state, etc. And that's where you can then also send love and light in a more direct, immediate, healing kind of way. So, and it's not limited to one person at a time. It can be sent to the entire collective, or indeed the whole universe, if you're deeply enough rooted in the God state beyond location. So, thank you for being here. You can feel this whole collective of the people that are exactly watching right now. Just by going deeper within, even to the nothingness kind of, with an intent to feel, to sense the unique collective, the combination of everyone who's right now watching just like you. If you can clear your mind enough to tune into that frequency, that in the ethers, then it will develop, it will translate in your subtle body, in a sense, as a feeling, as like coordinates, as a collective type of, it can come with an image, but it comes with a feeling for sure, with a knowingness of like, suddenly you're locked on, if you will. It's like there, this vibration represents the collective of everyone that's right now watching this video this very second. Then once you have that in your consciousness, especially from that deeper state of the love and the light of God, you can remember that that is connected to that. And you can just let that love and light radiate into them. So then you can actually feel everyone, in a sense. If that makes sense. So great to be one with you all. Hope to see you again on Wednesday.